Hello and welcome to Post-Pandemic Resilience in Business Strategy. My name is Kevin Hinkle, and today some of the objectives that we're going to cover in this presentation are competition under uncertainty, black swan events, effects of COVID on businesses, the new normal, strategic flexibility, resource-based view theory, residual claimants, and organizational hybridity. Uncertainty is when firms cannot reliably ascertain the outcomes of decisions in a decision-making setting. The outcome of this decision is unknown with certainty, and the possible outcomes of that decision are not known before a decision is made. Barney and LaFleur relate to this in casino gambling, as under uncertainty, it's not possible to calculate an expected return on a bet because you may not even know what game you're playing, and even if you do, the rules of the game might change in unpredictable ways. Cash flow projections are unreliable under uncertainty. In uncertain settings, such as conditions during the pandemic, unforeseeable costs and opportunities may affect realized cash flows in ways that cannot be anticipated. Under conditions of uncertainty, riskiness of cash flows cannot reliably be anticipated. The pandemic greatly increased these conditions. For this video, we're going to talk about black swan events. Black swan events are high impact events that are unpredictable under normal circumstances and appear inevitable in retrospect. The global economy has been rocked by various major economic events since 2008. Here we'll demonstrate the last decade, covering the US debt ceiling crisis, Black Monday in China, Brexit, and demonetization. For the focus of this video, we're going to talk about the Black Swan event, the 2020 pandemic, which wrought havoc across the global economy. The coronavirus pandemic affected all sectors of the economy in 2020, from small businesses such as dog groomers and family-owned restaurants to large corporate companies like Microsoft and Toyota. No one was safe from the microscopic monster, and all context of human life was shifted. Some companies continued to pay employees during the mandated shutdowns, and other establishments continued to pay health insurance premiums for employees told not to work. The greatest impact was in manufacturing, utilities, management of companies and enterprises, finance and insurance, mining, quarrying, and oil and gas extraction. Some of the other factors affected by COVID-19 supply chain, declining demand, shortages of supplies and inputs, and government mandated closures, which we've previously mentioned. The coronavirus pandemic has generated a lot of new concepts and problems that businesses have had to adapt to and learn to understand. One of these concepts is a new normal. A new normal is the state in which an economy, society, etc., settles following a crisis and is much different from the environment that prevailed before the start of that crisis. The new normal following COVID-19, according to Hitt et al., is one where firms must devise strategies to deal with short-term discontinuities and significant uncertainty to survive. Long-term strategic changes are needed to navigate the competitive landscape resulting from the technological, socio-political, and institutional changes that resemble causes of environmental jolts. Hitt et al. Refers to Douglas North's idea of a non-ergodic world where static equilibrium is unlikely to be reached. The unexpected dynamics generated by the pandemic have forced firms to operate in an environment of dynamic equilibria that continues to change long after the initial disruption has occurred. This means that firms will need to continue to operate under a state of uncertainty and work to build greater strategic flexibility within their strategic management process. The first theory we're going to discuss is the resource-based theory, and it's one of strategic management's most influential theoretical perspectives. It's ongoing for the last 3 decades, and there's a lot of research that goes into the resource-based theory, the resource-based view. Firm resources are critical for survival, especially during black swan events and thereafter. According to Hitt et al., in the short term, financial resources are needed for survival, especially due to the restriction on cash inflows to a firm. So, during the pandemic, demand for product and services dramatically decreased. People just simply weren't buying, or they couldn't actually get to a store to purchase because retail stores, many of the stores closed because of a government mandated policy. So companies were unable to generate sales. So cash dropped off. So those cash inflows caused them to lose quite a bit of money, and costs continued to increase while their revenues dropped. Some survival required firms to deplete their cash reserves and rely on leverage and the sale of assets in order to remain solvent. So some companies actually referred to selling their physical assets in order to survive. Firms existing Firms with existing competitive advantage and value appropriation decided to focus on survival and become less concerned with sustainable competitive advantage from valuable, rare, inimitable, and non-substitutable resources. This curtailed innovation and risk-taking. Firms that were capable of surviving the pandemic had the increased need to develop more flexible resources and add new capabilities that assist in navigating rapidly changing competitive landscapes and their environmental threats. So firms may need to focus less on their resources, at least their valuable, rare, inimitable, and non-substitutable resources, and create and develop greater adaptive efficiency. Firms must possess or rapidly develop dynamic capabilities to manage resources more flexibly, especially under conditions of uncertainty like a black swan event, such as the pandemic. The second theory that we're going to discuss is based around agency. Agency theory is focused on the relationship between principals and agents, and the theory that agents sometimes act in their own interests rather than the principals or shareholders. The pandemic shed a lot of light on this theory because many firms decided to focus on the survival of the company in the short term rather than increase focus on long-term value. The problem that managers faced during this black swan event placed managers at a razor's edge, with the resources scarce, threatened survival, and the potential of lost jobs. The pandemic also highlighted the level of uncertainty because most owner and managers had never experienced an event quite like the pandemic, making strategic decision making very difficult. Barney argues that non-owner stakeholders such as customers, employees, and the community should be considered when creating and evaluating long-term value. Economic disruptions from events such as the pandemic can severely harm firm stakeholders. He argues that stakeholders should receive value before shareholders because it is the stakeholders that create the necessity to create value in the first place. In the future, firms should be working to integrate these groups as complementars. Finally, to wrap up this post-pandemic video, we will share some final thoughts. The idea of organizational hybridity, where a firm integrates strategies, logics, and structural flexibility in an attempt to manage complex problems, it is a necessity. Firms need to design and implement strategic changes effectively, which increases the need for fluidity, speed, and mindsets encouraging innovative thinking and resilience. Developing these dynamic capabilities is a must in the post-pandemic era and calls for increasing sensing, seizing, and transforming capabilities, along with greater dynamic managerial capability. Again, we call for greater emphasis for stakeholder theory and the integration of stakeholders as principals in order to design and implement strategic changes in this new non-ergodic environment. One study out of Southeast Asia shows that many firms have focused heavily on increasing digital capabilities and organizational learning efficiency to keep up with the increasing digital transformation that was increased greatly by the pandemic response. If you're interested in further reading, you can check out my references. I always, through my research, going back to Barney and Hesterly, Barney and LaFleur, quite a bit of my research has been greatly influenced by those authors, those researchers. And for this one, Douglas North, 1999, I thought was very interesting because it takes a systems view of dealing with non-ergodic worlds. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, I would read about that. But before I leave, I wanted to ask, what would you have done as a manager of a firm during the pandemic? Would you have been more concerned with survival or increasing the long-term value for your shareholders? And how would you have felt about the stakeholders involved? Thank you.